Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. The world is watching us. That's what Eddie Reynoso and Canelo are probably feeling. The whole world is watching, Eddie Reynoso, Canelo. They're watching Terrence Crawford. Everybody's watching these guys. Everybody's just waiting to hear that somebody tested positive for some kind of PEDs. So now you got Eddie Reynoso and Canelo locked himself in a dust-free room with the gloves on, and Eddie Reynoso's taking control of everything now. He's saying, hey, this shit ain't happening no more. You guys are gonna come and try to take away from what we worked so hard at, is to turn Canelo into what he is today, and we did it by hard work, sacrifice, and it had nothing to do with PEDs. And I like the fact that they're taking shit serious. But the reality is, when it comes to this fight between Canelo and Terrence Crawford, the entire world has these guys under scrutiny, man. Now, should the whole world be keeping a close eye, in particular, on Canelo and Eddie Reynoso, and is that warranted? I mean, that's really the discussion point. So why the scrutiny? Because there are some fans who are saying there's no reason to scrutinize Eddie Reynoso. There's no reason to scrutinize Canelo. But this is the problem. I just did a video about Crawford and said he's not done anything wrong, but you're guilty by association because of something that Victor Conte did in the past. So now you're working with Snack. Anybody associated with Snack, people, should be a bit suspicious, right? Because the whole thing about what happened in the past, it's not even happening no more, from what we all understand. Kind of the same thing with Canelo. We know he had the up and down back in 2018. He tested positive for clenbuterol. People don't want to let that go. Now, he said he attributed the positive test to tainted meat in Mexico. Some people accept that excuse or alibi. Other people don't accept that. Now, although he's passed numerous tests since, that incident still lingers, and it affects the public's perception of Canelo. But this is where things get interesting, because makes you say, when you take a look at Eddie Reynoso and multiple fighters that were trained by him who tested positive for banned substances. Oscar Valdez, Luis Neri, Julio Cesar Martinez, Ryan Garcia. Even though he wasn't working with Ryan for the Devin fight, Ryan had worked with him at a certain point in time. And Francisco Rodriguez Jr., as recent as June 2025. There's a pattern. Now, I don't know about you guys, how many of you are familiar with stats, reading metrics, data analysis. With me and my background, I'm used to being in briefings, and we're looking at metrics. We're looking for trends, leading, lagging indicators, and we're looking for patterns. And when we notice a consistent pattern, like in particular, right, when we're all about sortie generation. So if I go back and look at the last 3 years and notice a pattern from, let's say, May through July, where we were able to fly more during those months, then that tells me that more than likely next year, because I can look at the pattern now, that during these months, the data shows me that we're going to be able to fly more sorties. So going into next year, we can plan to probably fly more. When you see a pattern of guys failing tests in a camp, underneath a camp that's being ran by Eddie Reynoso, that tells me that maybe in the next couple of months of next year, you're going to have more of these positive tests from different fighters. But the bottom line is Eddie Reynoso, whatever his training protocol and methods were and supplement protocols, it wasn't being done. It wasn't good enough. And now he seems to be taking control over it. But that's a huge issue. So unfortunately, Canelo is being grouped into all that. And part of me feels like it's not fair to Canelo. But part of me also understands how he's been, kind of drug into all this nonsense, especially when it seems to be that everybody wants to talk about goddamn PEDs right now, Canelo and Crawford. Now, it's funny because you listen to guys like Jeff Mayweather. Now, Jeff Mayweather is Floyd Mayweather's uncle, and he brought up a good point about Canelo. See, now I don't know if Canelo tests year round, but I know for this fight with Crawford, I think it's like he would be testing 12 weeks before the fight. So that's where his testing began. And then I don't know a whole lot about microdosing. I just read up on it. There's other guys out here who claim to be experts, but it seems like you can microdose year round and, not get caught doing it. But the bottom line is, as far as we know with Canelo, he's clean. But, Jeff Mayweather brought up a good point where he said, look, he doesn't feel a lot of fighters are going to, make a big deal about drug testing with Canelo, because if Canelo says he doesn't want to do drug testing and they push for it, they could lose the fight. You lose a fight with Canelo, you lose a huge payday. So I thought that was a pretty good point that he brought up. But again, I don't know how many fighters were going to fight Canelo, push for PED testing. Canelo said, no, I'm not doing it. And then all of a sudden they lost the fight. Like, I don't know anything about that. But I could see somebody who may want it and then end up just, if you have a huge payday in front of you, not just saying Canelo, any fighter, you almost just accept the terms because you don't want to miss out on the opportunity. Because one thing we do know about boxing, this is all boxers. Boxing is a business, man. And if you're a fighter whose financial draw is huge, let me tell you something, that can give you some leverage over any demand, in particular testing demands. So I thought that was a good point. Now, Bill Haney also said, Bill Haney says anything. He gave warning to Terrence Crawford, basically saying, hey, make sure you guys are testing. Because, it sounded to me like he didn't want Terrence Crawford to end up, getting a surprise by fighting Canelo and Canelo end up testing positive for something. Or has something in the system that, he tries to fly underneath the radar and ends up in a situation like Devin Haney and Ryan. But I tell you what, a lot of people have an opinion about Devin Haney and Ryan and Victor Conte. The one thing I'll say about Victor Conte, right? This is why I look at him a little weird. He never shuts up. He needs to listen more and talk less. When you're serving in the capacity that he's serving in, he shouldn't. To me, he just talks too much. You're the big man. You're running snack. You're making money hand over fist every month. What are you doing getting caught up in this shit show between these athletes? A lot of them are young guys. What's your big old ass with this big, weird, goddamn Mario mustache? What are you doing, man? Getting mixed up in this crap. So that's where I think, it kind of, for me, it makes me say, what's really going on with Victor Conte? You know what I'm saying? But the bottom line is no snack fighter has ever tested positive for anything. Now, Tim Bradley, he's another one who's come out and he's acknowledged that the PED rumors, but he said even if Canelo was using PEDs, it wouldn't matter because Tim Bradley would never say that anyone can beat Terrence Crawford, because I truly believe when Terrence Crawford and Tim Bradley were sparring, Crawford used to whip his ass so bad that Tim Bradley just is afraid to say something bad about him. But he believes both fighters are being tested, and he trusts VADA's oversight, and that's all we can do. So I guess the question is, why does it matter for Terrence Crawford? The whole world watching Canelo. Well, it matters for Terrence Crawford because he's moving up 3 weight classes, 154, 160, 168. He's fighting Canelo at 168. Now, Canelo, he could be cutting weight, come in a bit lighter to be faster. He could plan on weighing Terrence Crawford by 20, 25 pounds. But the bottom line is, the whole world watching Canelo and Reynoso benefits Crawford because there's already a perceived advantage as far as size and power. But if they start to create the narrative that, hey, there may be another advantage and tie that to PEDs, well, that we all know that could drastically affect the fairness and the outcome of a fight. So now that benefits Crawford to where even if there was some foul play that Canelo and Reynoso were trying to plan, it'll make them think 2, 3, 4, 5 times before doing it. Now, I'm not saying that they were planning it. I'm just saying with all the attention, the scrutiny on PED usage surrounding this fight for both Crawford and Canelo, but we're talking about Canelo, right? I think he and Reynoso, if there has ever been foul play, I think they know now, shit, the whole world's watching this. We can't mess this up. So for me, with Crawford being affiliated with Victor Conti Snack, both camps are underneath the microscope. You know, Crawford's camp, Canelo's camp. Now, I got something that I pulled up. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, right here. All right. Just a little bit bigger for you guys. Okay. Now, this is a side-by-side comparison of Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. Okay? Now, as far as a positive test, the history of that. Canelo tested positive. Make this a little bit bigger, right here. He tested positive for clenbuterol in 2018. Of course, he blamed it on the meat. Terrence Crawford never tested positive for any banned substance. The trainer's PED record. Eddie Reynoso's camp, multiple fighters test positive. Terrence Crawford works with Victor Conti, but no athlete under snack has failed tests. Now, the thing with that is, and this is just being real, Victor Conti came out and said that he knows how to help fighters beat the test. So when you look at that, it kind of makes you say, again, it makes you draw attention to it and scrutinize Victor Conti and the whole program, because you want to come out and say, well, none of our athletes have ever failed a test, but then you also want to come out here and say, I know how to ensure that my athletes pass the test. That's kind of crazy and shit, but, you know, we just have to accept it for what it is, right? As far as recent allegations surrounding PEDs, we all know Jaime Munguia, Francisco Rodriguez, and the other names I mentioned failed tests. Underneath the Eddie Reynoso umbrella, part of Canelo's camp and teammates. And then with Terrence Crawford, he's accused of juicing after a dramatic weight gain, but he just responds with sarcasm. As far as the public defense, Canelo says, I don't care. You know, this is what he has to say to the public to defend himself. I don't care if people don't believe the meat defense. You know, Terrence Crawford, he's like, laughs sarcastically, you know, test me all year long. You ain't gonna find nothing in my system. The testing program enrolled in VADA testing for 12 weeks before the fight is Canelo, and then also enrolled in VADA testing, tested June 13, 2025. So they're both doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, the transparency issues. Eddie Reynoso, you know, as a result of all those fails, he's come out now and said that he's taking full control over nutrition and supplements. This is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing for him, because if more fighters fail PED tests, then now 100% of the blame is going to fall on his shoulders. Right now, he kind of has an escape route. You know what I'm saying? But if there's more fails, it's 100% on him. Now, when it comes to Terrence Crawford, the transparency issues, Victor Conti says lack of public results is due to promoter/media discretion. So Victor Conti is blaming the promoter, and he's blaming and he's saying basically it's up to the media on what they do and don't want to cover. So what is VADA? Some people think it's ineffective. Some people think there needs to be other, you know, agencies being involved with PED testing and monitoring all this. VADA is just what a lot of y'all already know, man. It's just a voluntary anti-doping association, independent organization, and they conduct random year-round testing. Okay, blood, urine samples. I still don't know why they're not doing the hair samples. My understanding is hair samples are what is in the best. You have the urine sample, blood sample, but hair samples are the most trustworthy. Their hair samples are the most trustworthy. They say in their hair sample, it can pick up stuff that a person may have done, months ago, whereas blood and urine, not as long. So I still don't know why they don't just use hair samples and shit, but it is what it is. And VADA only publish results only are permitted by promoters and fighters. So why are fans watching all this shit closely? Because Eddie Reynoso's camp, they now earned a reputation for PED-related controversies. You know what I'm saying? Like this is something that they've earned, and they got to wear the hat. And I'm not saying they should wear it proudly, but it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? You created your own misery, so you got to deal with it. Now, this thing about Crawford and Snack, look, Crawford's clean. As far as I'm concerned, Canelo's clean. But the affiliation with Snack, both of those guys are just being scrutinized big time right now. And I'm not saying anything fair or unfair, but for me, and from a conversation perspective, I understand talking about things, but to come out and just say that, you know for a fact that someone's cheating, that's crazy to me. But we'll see how things go. Because one thing for sure with this fight, it involves extreme weight changes and high stakes, which is going to make transparency very crucial. And I definitely feel that Eddie Reynoso and Canelo understand that. Because there's a lot of dangers associated with PEDs, especially when you have a guy like Crawford coming up in weight. Could you imagine a guy like Crawford coming up 3 weight classes, being a clean athlete, and getting in the ring with someone who already outweighs him and could come in the ring 20, 25 pounds heavier than him on fight night, and that person to be juiced to the gills on PEDs? Now, I'm not saying that's the case with Canelo, but could you imagine the type of damage that can do to a fighter? Increased muscle mass and strength, recovery time better, hitting harder, training harder, endurance, aggression, punch resistance, explosiveness. The bigger man bringing all this shit into the ring, and the smaller man won't stand a chance. It's going to give unnatural advantages. The thing about a smaller guy coming up, I think it kind of balances out the playing field if the smaller guy is doing it, coming up to fight the bigger guy. But at the end of the day, it's unnatural, and it's unfair, and it's wrong. So it is what it is, you know what I'm saying? I just hope both of those guys get out of that fight. No one tests positive. They both get out healthy. No injuries, nothing too crazy. They can live to fight another day. I'm just telling you, man, fighters on PEDs, to me, that shit is just a safety hazard. And the last thing I want to hear or see is, something happened to either one of those guys and you find out somebody tested positive. That would just be horrible. Anyway, y'all keep cool. Shout out to the veterans, all 7 continents. Canelo and Eddie Reynoso, they on top of the game right now. And I think Canelo's clean. I understand all the PED-related controversy with Eddie Reynoso. But I think Canelo would have to be stupid. Even if he was cheating before, right? Because look, he did bubble up and start knocking out everybody, moving up in weight and putting bing-bings on everybody and shit. How? But what I'll say is, even if there was some foul play before by him, and even if there was some foul play before by Crawford, how stupid would they be going into this fight with all the attention on those guys and all this talk about PEDs, how stupid would they be to try to get away with something? Yo, fans, sports world, inside of boxing, outside of boxing, would publicly lynch them guys, man. That's not where they want to be. So as a result, I don't think we're going to have to worry about that from Crawford or Canelo. I don't think so. Anyway, y'all keep cool in the break.